Today I want to talk about this kind of idea. Is it possible that we live in a multidimensional universe where there are different entities, extraterrestrials, demons, aliens, souls, spirits, ghosts, whatever, right? A lot. Alright, this is Mike Sigula from TruthTheory.com and welcome to another episode of True Spirituality. Before we gonna start, please go to patreon.com/TruthTheory and consider becoming a supporter, because we've been heavily targeted by censorship in recent months over the last 2 years, like really heavily. And I'll be making an announcement soon of what's happening really behind the scenes, because it's just becoming harder and harder to do anything these days. There's alternative, let's say, because you constantly have to deal with being demonetized, being censored one way, shadow banned. So this is what we are going through all the time, and I'll be giving you some examples soon. And we cannot really continue our work without your help. So if this content brings you value, please consider supporting us. The best way you can do it is to go to patreon.com/TruthTheory, or you can just donate at truththeory.com/donate. Thank you for everyone who's helping us out, and let's talk about today's topic. So today I want to talk about this kind of idea. Is it possible that we live in a multi-dimensional universe where there are different entities, extraterrestrials, demons, aliens, souls, spirits, ghosts, whatever, right? A lot of people obviously will laugh, right? They will say that, oh my god, this is just BS, silly, these are myths, these types of beings do not exist, right? This is what most people think. However, there are so many people who are religious, right? Millions or if not billions of people. And most of religions are based on some kind of supernatural stories, right? Most religions talk about reincarnation. Most religions talk about the existence of soul, some higher beings, right? So it's interesting that there are so many people who are religious, but they kind of dismiss or laugh at these types of ideas, even though that's what their beliefs are based on, right? So that's the first thing. It's interesting that throughout thousands of years, many different cultures came up with the same understandings or same ideas, like soul, like reincarnation, like prayer, like gods that come from space or whatever it is, right? So maybe there is something to it, right? Maybe there is actually, these are more than just fairy tales and myths. Another interesting thing is that shamans in especially South America, but other places as well, in shamanic cultures that have been around for thousands of years, they keep talking about using plant medicines or psychedelics to reach higher states of consciousness and communicate with either spirits or some kind of entities. So there is a whole world and a whole culture that has been around for thousands of years, and millions of people took part in and participated in that. And they all claim that yes, there are higher worlds, there are different dimensions, and we can access intelligence in those worlds and dimensions. So this is another interesting evidence or area to look into that tells you, yes, it's not just fairy tales. There are millions of people who claim these things, who had these experiences. That's another thing to think about, right? Another interesting area. Countless people had either near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences. Sometimes out-of-body experiences can be done through just practice. There are techniques that anyone can use to have an out-of-body experience, and sometimes these happen when we have accidents or something like that, right? And most of those people tell you that, yeah, I left my body, I saw myself on bed, I could travel, I could hear what the doctors were saying, even though the doctors said they were unconscious, whatever. Or I met my spirit guides, my ancestors, people who passed away, they greeted me, they talked to me, or I talked to some angels, whatever. So this is often the case as well, and we cannot dismiss millions of accounts of people like that, right? What about children that remember their past lives? There are books written on the subject. What about regression therapists like Dolores Cannon, for example, and people who were able to access their past lives? So there are many ways, many accounts, many different areas that all tell us that we are living in a multidimensional reality with different entities, different levels of consciousness. But people these days won't even listen to that because it's not on the BBC News or CNN, or their government is not telling them that, so that means that it cannot exist, right? Think about it this way, right? But what about, let's look into what mainstream science tells us. They say we might have a dark matter that is most dark energy. Dark matter is actually most of our reality. We cannot see, we cannot measure it, whatever, we cannot access it, but it probably exists, right? That's one interesting clue here. Another is that we only perceive very small fraction of reality. We're talking about electromagnetic spectrum, from radio waves to gamma, and we only see a tiny fraction of that. So what they tell you is that our senses are very much subjective. We only perceive very small fraction of reality where there is a whole world outside of us. So that should give you another clue that it's very likely that there is a whole world out there, and we are basically like blind people here. We only tune into like a little bit of a frequency, and there are different frequencies, and some of these shamans, for example, with plant medicines, they could increase their levels of consciousness and access other frequencies. Or sometimes people who are psychic, their senses are basically developed a little bit farther than senses of normal people, and that's why they start having interactions with different TV channels, let's say, different radio stations, right? Because everything is a frequency. And again, think about history of science, let's say, people did not believe or that we have microorganisms, right? Like bacteria, whatever, right? Of course, it didn't make sense because they were too small to see them, right? Same thing could be now with what we are talking about. We have microorganisms that we cannot see, and then we have microbes that we cannot see. And only when, certain tools were developed, we were like microscopes, for example, we were able to see these things, right? So it could be the same now the other way around, but we still don't have technology to be able to access these other layers that all those millions and millions of people and different belief systems were talking about throughout the centuries, right? All I want to say here is just to have an open mind about these things, because once you start looking into that, it turns out that these ideas are way more plausible than most people believe. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others and have a look at previous episodes of True Spirituality. And please consider becoming a Patreon supporter so we can continue doing our work. It's patreon.com/TruthTheory. And thanks for checking this video. Until next time.